All right, guys, what's going on? Welcome in. Man, such an exciting time, right? GM interviews, head coaching rumors, head coaching interviews. It gets me fired up, right? Especially if the Jets are involved here. Now, in this one, I wanted to talk about a potential pairing similar to the Chiefs video that we did with Mike Borgonzi and talking about his potential link to a Matt Nagy or a Steve Spagnuolo. In this one, I wanted to talk about Chris Spielman and Aaron Glenn. And by the way, the reason why I like doing this style of video is because all of these guys are realistic. The Jets have interest in all of these guys. I could easily see potential pairings like this happen. And we all know that the National Football League is a connections-based league. It's all about the connections, right? It is very, very rare that Woody Johnson would say, hey, let's hire a consultant. Let's hire someone who I've never met, never talked to, and I'm just going to pay him all this money, and he's going to head up the search. And then that consultant is going to go out and hire someone that he's never met, he's never talked to. And then that GM is going to decide to land on a head coaching candidate that he doesn't know or he's never worked with. And it's like this big unknown, right? Of course, you know, guys can work with one another and get to know each other, obviously. But whenever you're talking to first of all, whenever you need a general manager and you're searching through candidates, wherever these candidates are coming from, there's going to be that initial inside information that those GM candidates are going to have on their coaches. So again, going back to the Borgonzi video, let's just say Mike Borgonzi gets the Jets GM job. He's going to know exactly the roles of Spagnuolo and Nagy within that Chiefs organization. He's going to know how they work. He's going to know how players and coaches treat them. He's going to know how much is on their plate, how much responsibility they have, how much input they actually have to game planning, to potentially calling plays. You know, who's just sitting idly by and who's really contributing. They also know maybe draft input as well, tendencies throughout the week. This stuff is really, really important, as opposed to, hey, we're just going to sit down with someone for 2-3 hours, get to know them and try to figure them out, you know, again, in a first interview style. If Borgonzi gets the gig and they interview Nagy a second time, they interview Spags a second time, with Borgonzi at the helm, yeah, you're going to imagine that there's going to be that inside connection already. And then vice versa. If they aren't up to the challenge, would a guy in Borgonzi want to even recommend them? So, you know, again, living in this hypothetical, if Mike gets the job and we don't hear anything about Spags, we don't hear anything about Nagy, I think it's pretty safe to say that they're not qualified. So in this one, I wanted to focus in on Chris Spielman, someone who made huge headlines the other day when the Jets requested to interview him for general manager. Now, why is this interesting? Because, of course, he's coming over from the most successful team in the National Football League this season in the Detroit Lions. We're looking at the Lions turnaround. It's flat out incredible. Flat out incredible. You know, the blueprint is clear. Bunch of former players, tough, physicality, right? Accountability, take ownership. And we're going to embrace the grind. We're going to embrace kind of that attack the day mentality. And that's why we see a lot of players continuously getting better. That's why we see this team face adversity and no one seems to blink or back down or get all rattled by the media or anything like that. They have really built, even if the Lions go out and lose Aaron Glenn, Chris Spielman, you know, in this case, they could lose Ben Johnson. You still have confidence that they're going to find replacements because that culture is just so strong. It's so strong at this point in time. So we look at a guy in Chris Spielman, right? A former longtime Lion, someone who knows what it's like to be a Lion, someone who knows that media, someone who knows that city very, very well, right? Such a successful player, such a physical player as well. But Spielman's someone who, after the game, hit the broadcast booth. So he's been around the game even more, right? In that post-playing days career, and he recently became a member of the Lions front office. And he's been described as someone who kind of works in the shadows to a certain degree. I reached out to my buddy who's a diehard Lions fan, knows the organization inside out. I'm like, hey man, Jets are interviewing Chris Spielman. What are your thoughts? And you know what? Let me actually just read you the exact text. He says, yeah, Chris Spielman is the undercover guy in the dark that has done so much for our organization in the last 3 years, extremely bright football mind, he would be great for the Jets. I believe there's rumblings out there that Chris Spielman basically assisted Sheila Ford-Hamp into hiring Brad Holmes as general manager. We all know how that went, really, really successfully for the Lions, and that was really what kind of kickstarted this whole culture change over in Detroit. So I think what's relevant here is Chris Spielman is someone who, again, having that player background, having the ability to identify talent around him, having the ability to work with an owner and work with the team that has been labeled as dysfunctional for a very, very, very long time. I know you can argue the ownership change, but Sheila Ford-Hamp actually has been making decisions for a while with this, with this Lions team. So credit Chris Spielman, right? I think what's interesting too about Chris, and granted, we're only talking about 3 openings here: Jets, Titans, Raiders. And that Raiders one, man, I was shocked by it. We had an NFL team fire a general manager after 1 year. It's kind of like I'm assuming the effect of, hey, you know what? We need a clean slate, fresh start. Or are we talking to a head coach that wants more power? So we're going to essentially can Telesco and say, here you go, so-and-so, whoever it may be, here's that extra power that you want, right? You can now have the power to pick out your general manager, right? Stuff like that. Some of the same rumors that we were hearing kind of with the Jets with Mike Vrabel. In any case, there hasn't been any other updates with the Titans or the Raiders in regards to requesting to interview Chris Spielman. So as of right now, the Jets are the only team. And to be honest with you, I think Chris, based off of interviews, based off of his reputation, based off of his background, I do think it would be a really, really interesting fit. Again, this is not me saying, oh, we're just going to duplicate exactly what the Lions did and we're going to win 15 games in a couple years. That's not what I'm saying. But I do think having that hard-nosed, physical, kind of no BS mentality, just kind of like it's up to us to go turn this thing around and we can go do it, as opposed to excuse making and the justification of losses stacked on top of empty promises, catchphrases, and talking about how good we currently are, yet the results don't show it. I think the Lions are a good example of the opposite of that, really. And so to pluck someone over from that organization, especially someone with a lot of power, especially someone who has that former player background, especially someone who's made such a massive impact for that organization, of course, I think it's really, really important. Of course, I'm intrigued by an addition like that. And then and by the way, one of the members that is heading up this Jets search is Rick Spielman, Chris Spielman's older brother. Would Rick Spielman request to interview his brother if he knew that Chris Spielman was not a good fit, or if Chris didn't want the job? That makes zero sense. It's just like that's just a waste of everyone's time, including Chris Spielman, especially if Rick felt as though he was not a fit for the Jets. That's almost like an embarrassing or almost like a slap in the face to Chris to put in a request to interview him knowing he's not going to get the job. Like, would he do that to his own brother? Like, no, it makes absolutely no sense. So I think from that standpoint, as simple as it might sound, oh, these two guys are brothers, I think it does make sense, right? Rick wouldn't, I don't believe that Rick would interview or try to have some sort of input on this potential GM interview if he didn't feel like it was a right fit. I think Tannenbaum would trust Rick Spielman enough to say, hey, tell me the truth, man. What are you thinking here? If Rick greenlights it, then I think, hey, this thing, this thing has a chance to go through here. Now, of course, Chris has not been a general manager before. So how does he handle contracts? How does he handle agent negotiations? How does he handle draft picks? Because all that stuff has kind of been led by Brad Holmes and others. It's not Chris Spielman doing it himself, but you know what? Again, kind of going back to the start of the video here, it's all about connections. He has that connect with his brother Rick. He has the connect with all those members in the Lions front office, right? He has connections. It's not to say that he can't learn on the fly, on the job. And so we look at the trickle-down effect, right? Living in this world where Chris Spielman gets the Jets GM job, Aaron Glenn has been someone who is talked about a lot with the Jets. Former player, knows Tannenbaum, has worked for Tannenbaum before in the past. This is someone who knows the market. This is someone who knows the team. He's a Bill Parcells guy. He's obviously had a ton of success as a coach early on with the New Orleans Saints. We're seeing what he's doing with the Detroit Lions. I mean, man, players love playing for him. Coaches really rely on him, and they love him as well. He's been around some great coaches. Again, Bill Parcells, Dan Campbell, Ben Johnson, Sean Payton, Joe Brady. Despite the range in overall successes and ages, those are all really, really good football coaches. And Aaron Glenn has seen all of them. He's been around all of them. He's worked with all of them. And I think that bodes really, really well for the Jets. I think one thing that Aaron Glenn brings to the table as well is connections, right? He could bring in a Dennis Allen as DC. He could bring in an Anthony Lynn or a Carmichael as OC, right? In other words, veteran assistant coaches. The anti-Robert Saleh, right? Where it was Mike LaFleur and Jeff Ulbrich, guys that haven't really done those jobs before, where it's a big learning curve for everybody involved. With Glenn, I feel like he could really do a good job of bringing in former head coaches or veteran minds that can help take pressure off of him and or give him advice along the way, maybe take on some sort of leadership role. I think that would be flat out awesome. Now, it's kind of funny because I keep seeing this video clip being floated around from a couple years ago from the Pivot podcast with Aaron Glenn. People keep sharing the video of a small snippet of the podcast where basically Glenn is talking about coach to player relationships and like a personalized story that he did and went through. And it seems like after this 3-minute clip that has resurfaced, there's a lot of people that are now on board with Aaron Glenn. But I think, Glenn really since the beginning has always kind of been that player's coach, right? He's always been known to, that's what everyone was talking about from the beginning, right? I mean, you just listen to a Dan Campbell press conference and him talking about AG, like he loves him. He loves him. So I personally think that Aaron Glenn has a very, very, very good shot in becoming the Jets head coach. But here's the problem. This dude right here, Mickey Loomis of the New Orleans Saints, right? Someone who's been described as just a master negotiator, someone who always seems to have a plan for the Saints, someone with a ton of say, someone with a ton of responsibility within that New Orleans Saints organization. Aaron Glenn, as we all know, has coached for the New Orleans Saints. And because Mickey Loomis is still in charge, I think Aaron Glenn is actually the front runner in New Orleans, right? It's kind of that play it safe style that Loomis likes to, or has put on display in these last handful of years, right? Where we're not going to be rocking the boat. We're not going to be, adding this like systematic change, this big shifting of gears within the organization. We're going to shake up the power structure. That it's not really how the Saints roll. Another name I keep seeing with the Saints is Mike McCarthy. And of course, Mike McCarthy has ties to the New Orleans Saints. Now McCarthy's obviously with Dallas. So that would only be in the situation where he gets let go and Dallas wants to restart. But I find another one is Joe Brady, right? Another coach with the Sean Payton connection. And it's not to say that it's only going to be those three guys, right? Obviously, but it really feels like there's a lot of smoke surrounding those three candidates. So it really, I believe, comes down to Aaron Glenn, right? And this is assuming he smashes the interviews for both organizations. But would he want the Jets or would he want the Saints? The Saints, obviously, I think are more attractive as far as eyes on you, early expectations, pressure to win, things of that nature. But I think the Jets roster is maybe in a better position right now with just having younger players that are going to contribute. Braylon Allen, Breece Hall, Olu Fashanu, AVT, John Simpson, Joe Tipp. Like there's a lot of young players here on cheap deals that you feel like, okay, we don't have to worry about some key positions. We have Jermaine Johnson coming back at edge. We have Will McDonald coming off a career season. Quinnen on the inside, again, left tackle, running backs, tons of running backs at your disposal. It's really only like a handful of positions on the defense, and you got to imagine, okay, Aaron Glenn can maybe, get either A, maximize what we currently have, or B, be able to find replacements on the cheap or in those middle rounds. That's exactly what they've done in Detroit, and they've just developed those players. And then on offense, right, quarterback, right tackle, tight end, wide receiver depth. So I know on paper, lots of bullet points, lots of team needs, but with the Saints, lots of team needs, but also very, very, very difficult cap situation. You got to imagine that whoever's going to be taking that Saints job, they take one step back to take 3 steps forward when a lot of this money comes off of the Saints financials. So anyway, let me know your thoughts down below in the comment section on this. A potential Chris Spielman to Aaron Glenn pairing in the New York Jets organization to kind of mimic or duplicate what we're seeing with the Detroit Lions. Anyway, thanks so much for watching. Let me know your thoughts. And as always, go Jets.